Imagine a world where the smallest act of kindness can change everything. The desert burned under a merciless white sky, a vast ocean of sand that shimmered as if set aflame by the sun. Heat rippled in waves, swallowing the horizon and bending distant shapes into ghosts. Nothing stirred but the dry wind, dragging dust across dunes like old whispers. In that furnace of silence, a small figure crawled. Ori, a golden lion cub, had been torn from his pride during a sudden flood that ripped through a wadi after a rare storm, swept away, battered, and abandoned on the far side of the desert. He had wandered ever since, searching for water, shade, and the faint memory of safety. His ribs jutted from his sides, his paws cracked and raw, and even his shadow was fading in the searing light. Yet his amber eyes still glowed with something stubborn. Though his body trembled with exhaustion, his heart clung to a flame no heat could snuff out. Every step hurt, but still, he moved. For in his tiny frame, a fierce truth had already taken root. To stop was to surrender, and to surrender was to die. Through the wavering haze, something vast emerged. At first, Ari thought it a mirage, a mountain born of heat. But as it swayed closer, the mountain grew legs long and deliberate. It was a camel, high and solemn, its body like a moving hill against the sky. The cub froze. Instinct whispered to hide, but he had nothing left to lose. Summoning all his courage, Ari did the bravest thing his weary soul could manage. He pushed himself upright on trembling hind legs, swayed dangerously, then brought his paws together in a gesture that looked almost like prayer. He raised his gaze to the giant and begged without words. The desert wind stole any sound he might have made, but the action carried weight beyond roar or cry. The camel halted, its long lashes flickered, and for a moment its massive form cast shade across the cub. Warm breath washed over Ari, carrying a scent of dry grass and earth. Then, with the patience of ages, the camel folded its knees and sank to the sand. A shadow embraced Ori, and for the first time in days the world cooled. But just as hope stirred in his chest, a faint sound broke the stillness. From a thorny clump of desert brush came a whimper, thin and aching. Ori turned his head and, dragging his fragile body forward, discovered a small cream-colored puppy half buried in dust. One leg twisted unnaturally, matted with dried blood. Her eyes fluttered open but could not hold. The effort of lifting her head was too great. It fell back with a weak thud. Ari pressed his nose gently against her wound, then to her brow. He felt her shiver. Something inside him older than his days knew he had found another soul abandoned to the cruelty of chance. He turned back to the camel, desperation blazing silently in his eyes. Kedar, the camel, seemed to understand. The great beast lowered its muzzle, sliding beneath the fragile pup. Inch by inch, careful as a craftsman, it lifted her from the sand. Then, with a groaning patience, Kedar bent lower still until its broad back brushed the ground. Ari pushed with all his strength, guiding the puppy upward. His claws scraped, his chest heaved, but slowly Neva the pup settled in the soft cradle of the camel's fur. She whimpered once, then sighed, her breathing steadier than before. The camel rose. The journey had begun. Together they moved, three unlikely wanderers. The desert stretched endless, but no longer was Ori alone. He stumbled often, collapsing into Kedar's trailing shade, only to rise again with grit that startled even himself. Above him, Neva swayed like a feather on a patient tide, rocked safely on the camel's hump. The sun hammered, but step by step they endured. At dusk, trouble came. Hyenas thin as famine, their laughter sharp as broken glass, crept from the dunes. Their eyes glittered, circling, their bodies weaving into a tightening ring. Ari's heart rattled, but he planted himself before the camel, tail stiff, a spark of defiance crackling in his throat. A sound escaped small, but fierce. The desert answered with thunder. Kedar surged upward, hooves slamming the sand in explosions of light. Its booming bellow rolled across the dunes, a sound of ancient power. A long neck swept like a whip, bowling one hyena aside. Another shrieked as the storm of hooves drove it back. The ring broke. Fear drowned their laughter, and they slunk into the cooling dark. When silence returned, Ari pressed against Kedar's leg, shaking but unbroken. They had survived. Together. Night draped the desert before they found water. At last, an oasis revealed itself small as a coin, silver under trembling stars, ringed by palms that whispered with the wind. Kador knelt, lowering Neva, who lapped greedily at the mirror pool, before sighing with relief. Ari drank until his belly ached, then lifted his head. Their three reflections lay side by side in the rippling water. Above them, constellations glittered like guardians. That night they rested. Kadar stood sentinel, blinking slowly at skies it had walked beneath for years. Ari curled against Neva, warming her wounded leg with his small body. Pain still whispered, but so did hope. Far away a jackal barked once, then fell silent, as if the desert itself had hushed in reverence. Dawn painted the dunes in soft gold when a figure appeared. A weary herder named Samir, a canvas bag slung across his shoulder. He stopped dead at the sight before him, a lion cub leaning against a camel's leg. A fragile cream puppy draped across the giant's back. Shock froze him. Awe melted it. Kadar bent his knees, allowing Samir to approach. The man knelt, hands steady, and lifted Neva into his arms. He carried her to the oasis edge, washed the blood away, and bound her small leg with strips of cloth. His water skin opened. He offered drink to cub, pup, and camel alike. Ori licked droplets from his whiskers. Neva breathed easier. Samir's eyes softened with something more than pity recognition. Perhaps that life's family is not always chosen by blood. Knowing the desert would not forgive them their weakness, he called the nearby rangers. By sunset, a jeep arrived. Carefully, the animals were lifted into its safe hold and driven to a wildlife sanctuary. Days unfolded into weeks. The sanctuary, Neva healed slowly, her leg mended by gentle hands. Ori regained strength, his golden fur shining once more. And Kadar remained always near, a guardian who had chosen them as much as they had chosen him. Every evening, as the sun spilled gold across the horizon, the three rested together, lion cub, puppy, and camel no longer lost souls of the desert, but a family forged by compassion. In the end, the desert had not been their grave, but their forge. It had burned, broken, and tested them. But it had also given them each other. For in the endless desert of life, true family is not bound by blood or species, but by the courage to protect, the patience to endure, and the compassion to lift another when hope seems lost. And so the legend of Ari, Neva, and Kadar spread whispered by herders under the stars, it told by rangers, two wide-eyed children, remembered by the desert wind itself, a story of survival, of love, of a family found where none was expected.